Let me ask you something real. What if the rude awakening wasn't that they lied, but that you did? You lied to keep the peace. You lied to stay chosen. You lied because telling the truth would have meant losing people you thought you couldn't live without. You called it growth, but it was grooming yourself to be tolerable. You performed healed when you were just hiding the hemorrhage. Shadow work doesn't knock. It kicks in the door. It doesn't come for your curated self. It comes for the version of you you buried under performance, perfectionism, and people-pleasing. This isn't about healing for aesthetics. It's not peace you can post. It's the kind of healing that burns the costume off. It leaves you raw, trembling, but real. And that's where we begin. Welcome back to Empowered Shadows. I'm your host, Shayla. And tonight, we're not dressing the wound. We're ripping off the band-aids. Not to bleed, but to finally breathe. Because real healing doesn't start in the light. It begins in the places you were taught to avoid. The silence, the mess, the parts of you thought no one could love. This is where your rebirth begins. In the rot, not the gloss. In the dark, not the light. Let's begin. The lie that looked like love. You told the world you were okay, but you were just functional enough to fool them. You posted peace, but you were performing survival. You said you'd heal, but really, you just stopped crying loud enough for anyone to notice. You wore peace like a costume and hoped no one would look too close. But shadow work doesn't care about optics. It doesn't care about your timeline, your followers, or your curated morning routine. It shows up and holds the mirror steady. It doesn't let you flinch. It says, you betrayed yourself first. You said yes when your body screamed no. You called silence strength. You called fear intuition. You let the ache become your identity. You performed chill while you were grieving. You called it grace, but it was self-erasure. You called it compassion, but it was fear of being abandoned. The rude awakening is not just what they did to you. It's what you kept allowing over and over. Because broken felt like home. Because the pain was predictable. Because somewhere along the line, Suffering became your standard of love. But that story is over. And shadow work is the pen in your hand. When familiar becomes a trap. You didn't fall in love. You fell into rhythm. The rhythm of rejection, chaos, abandonment. You thought you were choosing them, but really, your trauma chose them for you. You mistook tension for chemistry, anxiety for butterflies, withholding for death. Because chaos reminded you of home. Because the dysfunction was dressed up in a better outfit, but it was still the same story. And that story, it was written in your childhood, rewritten in your relationships, reinforced by every time you call pain purpose. But then something shifted. You stopped craving approval. You started craving peace. That was your soul saying, no more. And that moment, that was your rude awakening. Your healing is being held hostage by your avoidance. You've studied the signs. You've read the books. You've reposted the quotes. But have you sat in your own silence long enough to hear what your shadow has to say? You say you're doing the work, but you're still skipping steps, still intellectualizing your pain instead of feeling it, still calling knowing the same thing as healing. Shadow work doesn't care how many journal prompts you've saved. Does it care? It asks, why haven't you faced the part of yourself that's still addicted to chaos? You're not avoiding pain. You're avoiding transformation. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And then you have no choice but to change. Accountability is the gatekeeper to freedom. You can't heal what you keep blaming. Yes, they hurt you, but you gave them the access. You ignored the red flags. You laughed off the gut feelings. You made peace with pain because you were afraid of loneliness. But loneliness isn't what broke you. Self-abandonment did. Shadow work isn't about calling out their abuse. It's about owning how long you tolerated it and why. Because when you name that, you stop waiting for closure. You become the closure. You can't heal what you still worship. You want peace? but you're still praying over the wound. Still looking back at the past with soft eyes. Still telling the story that it was some tragic romance, when really it was betrayal. You turned your trauma into personality, pain into content, and survival into a brand. But healing asks, what happens when you no longer need the wound to explain who you are? What happens when you outgrow the identity you built from pain? You can't take that version of you into your future. You're not supposed to. You want peace? Stop worshiping your pain. Stop watering what you've outgrown. The version of you that stayed, she was necessary. She kept you alive. But now she's keeping you small. You're still protecting her like she's sacred. But she was just a season, a survival code. And baby, she expired. She told you staying was love. She told you silence was peace. She told you being chosen was worth being mistreated. Shadow work doesn't ask you to hate her. It asks you to stop worshiping her. You loved her, but she can't walk with you into your healing. Let her rest. Let her be a memory, not identity. The rude awakening is sacred, not because it's gentle, but because it's honest. It's the parting of the veil, the death of a lie, the first breath after suffocating in your own silence. This isn't your breakdown. This is your becoming. This is your return to the truth of who you were before the world told you to dim. You don't need another affirmation. You need an intervention with yourself. You need to stop decorating your cage and then call it a sanctuary. You need to stop praying for clarity while clinging to confusion. You say you want peace, but you're still entertaining the patterns that poisoned it. You say you're ready, but you're still dressing your wounds for attention instead of healing them for liberation. Let this episode be your mirror. Let it be your permission slip to stop hiding. Let it be the funeral for the version of you that only knew how to survive. Because the truth is, you're not confused. You're conditioned. You're not weak. You're still waiting for someone to save you when it's always been you. This is Empowered Shadows, a sanctuary for the souls who's done performing, done pleasing, done pretending they don't know better. If it hurts, good. That means it hit the wound. And now you have a choice. Repress it, repost it, or rise from it. Because the shadow doesn't lie. And your soul, she's been screaming for this moment. Don't betray her again. Thank you for listening.